the BBC are pretending to ask about Hamas and what's going on in Palestine, I should say, rather than Israel. The fact is that the Palestinians had to compensate Jews for supposedly what took place in Europe. Okay, now I'm partly Jewish myself, and I dispute the official version of what happened in Europe in World War Two. I'm certainly not disputing that Jews died. I'm certainly not disputing that innocent Jews died. But what I am saying is that the number of people who died and the reasons for their death are not as we are told in the history books. It's not unknown. I mean, Churchill himself said, and it's not just him, that history is always written by the winning team. I mean, he said history would be kind to him because he would write it himself. That's what he said. So please be aware that the official story of what what happened in World War Two isn't true, and wouldn't be true whatever happened in World War Two, because whoever wins the war writes the version. Okay. Now the media have always been, especially BBC, very, very anti-Palestinian. They regard Muslims as terrorists, and they regard Palestinians as terrorists. They completely endorse the idea that Jews who've been resident in Europe for thousands of years, hundreds of years, have some sort of divine right to return to someone else's country. Meanwhile, we won't allow Meanwhile, we don't allow Serbs to live in Kosovo, and they've got far more right to live there than American Jews do to live in what is now called Israel. Okay. Now Israel is a fait accompli. It's a done deal. It was given to them by the UN at Palestinian expense, and the hostility and the hatred that mass media have for Palestinian people. I mean, we're told a lot about the Warsaw Ghetto and how heroic the Jews were to fight back and all the rest of it. That could well be true, but surely Gaza is the world's biggest concentration camp, right? People aren't even allowed to go fishing. Israel maintains a blockade. There's all these people cooped up in that area. And now Netanyahu, one of the world's wickedest men, wicked man, who was involved in 9/11 as a major participant. Muslims took the blame for that. They were made to be. There's a little film clip from a movie, and the guy says, we'll blame the Muslims, naturally, for so-called terrorism. A Palestinian boy reacts in front of an Israeli car. How do we know it's an Israeli car? In fact, if you're going to nick a car, why would you set fire to it? I'm sure there's someone in Gaza who could use the car. It says, here's what you need to know about the people and places involved. Well, it's not, it's not a bad idea to give context. In fact, it's an excellent idea, because the vast majority of the public are very, very badly informed, right? Islamist militant group. Actually, there's a lot of evidence to say that Hamas was created by the Israelis themselves, who wanted a militant group to be their opponent because it would be better for their propaganda, right? So think about it. Would it not make sense for Israel to support or create or encourage Islamic fundamentalism? Islamic fundamentalism is good for Israel. It's been manufactured. Don't forget, in the 70s, tourists, backpackers used to go to Afghanistan on a regular basis. It was a hippie haven, and the people there were very welcoming. So what happened? Well, we created this trouble. Islamic fundamentalism has been created by the West. Okay, I mean, even ISIS, for example, the proper acronym for the Mossad is the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. Don't take my word for it, or for that matter, don't just ignore what I'm saying. Look it up for yourself. You'll find the evidence online if you look for it. So for some reason, the Muslims created a terrorist organization named after their arch enemy. How does that work out? 2.3 million people as one of the highest population densities in the world. So 2.3 million people live in this strip here. It's not fair, is it? Surely Jews know that. But it's better for Israel that these Palestinians are cooped up there than they would be if they lived in what is now called Israel. Look, I understand if you're a Jewish person and you were born in a country that is called Israel, you'd feel an affinity for your place of birth, right? Israel has been manufactured, but it's still a real country. And that is the problem. We've been talking for donkey's years about the two. Do you think like Keir Starmer's wife is Israeli, for God's sake? His children have been brought up as Jews. He describes himself, just like his friend Tony Blair, as a Zionist. Pretty much, Boris Johnson is another Zionist who's partly Jewish. By the way, being partly Jewish doesn't mean you're a Zionist. In fact, being fully Jewish doesn't make you a Zionist, as there are in fact many Jews who don't like what Israel is, or more particularly what Israel has become. In the beginning of Israel, it was relatively moralistic country. They had kibbutzes, and the whole thing was kind of like a pioneering spirit. But in recent years, especially with regard to Netanyahu, it's become an incredible bully, a regional bully and troublemaker. And the Israelis are determined to create trouble for the West. So they basically set up Muslims to fight the West, so that we will fight them on their behalf. I don't want to get involved in these issues, and I don't want to get involved in Ukraine either. Of course, Zelensky's another Jew. Think about how much trouble these people cause us, and how unfair and how bigoted the media is. Constant tension between Israel and Hamas came without warning. Well, I'd have thought firing thousands of missiles would give a warning. Jeremy Bowen is a right fraud. You can see a picture of him, I think it's in Ukraine, he's pretending to be like crawling around and there's a woman with a shopping trolley right behind him, you know. The Wire. Well, the point is they shouldn't be cooped up there in the first place. Many of the people who live in Gaza were born in other parts of Palestine, right? And what I want to know is, with all this focus on Ukraine, what about issues such as Nagorno-Karabakh? What about issues such as Gaza? What about issues? They've all been forgotten, right? There are multiple issues, ongoing issues in the world. But the media direct people, Ukraine is the most important issue. Ukraine is the most important issue. Russia is bad, Ukraine is good. Zelensky's great. We must have Ukraine in the EU. We must have Ukraine in NATO. Please allow Ukrainian men to emigrate to the West immediately and get a job and a council flat and give them money. And let's show how wonderful they are. I mean, my local council is just bloody Ukraine. I don't give a shit about it. It's very unfair to force people like me. I mean, the assumption that we've all got to support it. I don't support Ukraine. I do not. I do not support Israel. I do not support climate change. I do not support the people making billions from vaccinations, constantly trying to pretend that we're all constantly ill, constantly trying to pretend that we've all got to spend every waking moment worrying about germs and viruses and things, instead of just living our lives normally. Does this picture look like a Photoshop to you? Look at these people in the background. Something very bad. I mean, Reuters, this is a very poor quality picture, isn't it? Could be Israeli propaganda. They do it all the time. One of their examples of Israeli propaganda, and it's really wicked. The Israelis filmed some of their operatives handing out sweets in Gaza. Sorry, I don't know where it was. And all the people looked delighted. And then American media ran this as if it was Palestinians who were celebrating 9/11. It was pre-recorded. It wasn't. It was. If you can give people sweets and they can look happy, but if you to then suggest it was because of 9/11 when in fact it was something pre-recorded for something. This is the way things are. It's shocking, absolutely shocking. Yet the militants simply bulldozed their way through it, cut holes in the wire, entered Israel from the sea and by paraglider. By the sea and by paraglider. Well, I've done a bit of paragliding many years ago, and Gaza's very flat, so you'd need the right kind of wind. For example, if you wanted to fly from Gaza, you'd have to be able to, you'd have to have the right kind of wind, have to be coming towards you, and you'd also have to have some height. So since Gaza's flat, I don't think there's any hill you could take off from. Anyone in a paraglider would be very, very easy to shoot. You don't want to be in a paraglider when people are, if you'd be noticed by all the military who are in the area. So if Palestinians, 99% of Palestinians who tried to land in Israel by paraglider, even assuming there was a hill that they could take off from and the wind was in the right direction, would be shot down in the sky. So I don't believe that and also paragliders aren't something you can make at home. You know what I mean? I don't believe a Gaza paraglider. I think Israel, as usual, is just making it all up, and maybe this story isn't even true. It could be that Israel has created an event to blame the Palestinians. They do it all the time. The Gulf of Tonkin blamed Vietnam. Of course, Vietnam is no longer an enemy, but don't forget it used to be an enemy. People like me said, "Oh, please don't invade, don't attack Vietnam. It's only going to make things worse." No, we got ignored as usual. And what happened? It made things worse. And did we not kill 3 million Vietnamese? And around the world, there's all kinds of wars. All over Africa, there's wars. There's still ongoing conflicts in Europe, especially in Northern Ireland and Kosovo, Ukraine, obviously, and in some other regions. There's ongoing issues. The media tell you what you should think, who you should support. The one thing I would say to you, if there's something you can take away from this, is that Israel is not the good guy, and that Israel has made no real efforts to solve or improve this problem. Right? We've talked about a two-state solution. It's been talked about for decades. They are simply buying time. Simply buying time. Right? Can you tell me, can anybody say to me in the comments, show me some evidence Israel has been really, really working hard to help the Palestinian people improve their lifestyle and find a solution to this problem? No. They talk about a two-state solution, but it's only a method to buy time. Look, this is the US border. Biden cannot escape Trump's shadow in border crisis. Americans have been all these immigrants have been invited to America by the same people who rule Israel. They're destroying our countries from within. You know, it's the worst kind of treason. If someone in your home is trying to destroy you, then that's the worst thing that can happen to you. It's bad enough dealing with strangers. Israel attack prompts London police rise. That's nice. The police never come to burglaries. The police never come to, seldom come to, or very seldom do anything about shoplifting, car crime, bicycle thefts. Never. But for some reason, police patrols in London have to increase because of what's happening here. Look, this is Gaza, and the Israelis destroying their buildings. Right? I mean, people live here. Right? People live here. We're glorifying the terrorist activities. Again, the British government taking sides. Right? The British government taking sides. I think it's absolutely disgusting how little empathy we have with the Palestinians. Even if the Palestinians did what we are told they've done, it will be very, very understandable, because nothing is being done to help them. Nothing is being done, and support is being given to Netanyahu. Israel receives billions every year, every bloody year, hundreds of billions over the decades